I knew you would.
So here's the deal. If you have a top 5 pick and you don't have a quarterback, it is basically always a mistake to take a position player. So like even if the position player is awesome. So like in 2019, I went through guys who went top 5 who are universally considered awesome players. The Jets in 2019 drafted Quinnen Williams at 3. He's a great player. It has helped them none. The Giants, the year before, drafted Saquon at 2. He's an unbelievable player. Cleveland drafted Myles Garrett. They were like, is he the greatest defensive end in 25 years? Point. It doesn't matter. Like, it hasn't helped him. The Chargers drafted Bosa the same year, and the Jags drafted Jalen Ramsey. They got one kind of competitive season out of that. The Raiders drafted Amari Cooper the year before. So that's every single year is one of these, and those are just the guys that hit. So as amazing as Travis Hunter is and as amazing as Abdul Carter is, if you are the Giants or the Browns, it is almost assuredly the right decision if someone is willing to give you extra capital that you can then use to one day hopefully acquire the quarterback. So, and I think Abdul will be a very good player. No reason not to believe that. I think Travis could be a transcendent player. I also just don't think that moves the needle for a team that doesn't have the quarterback.
I actually agree with you because these two teams have so many other needs as well.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a quarterback you love, maybe you trade down, get more picks to fill other needs that you have. And let's say you like, whether it's Dart, Shuck, whoever, a quarterback, as much as Milroe, as much as you like Shedeur and Cam Ward. You're not going to get Cam, but Shedeur. Then you figure we also can draft a quarterback late, but also fill these other needs. And like you said, Myles Garrett is great. The Browns aren't any good. Micah Parsons is great. At least this past season, the Cowboys not any good. So, yeah, I tend to agree with Nick on this.
Yeah, the part you said about quarterback you love. And both of these teams, where they're going to be picking, we all are in agreement. Cam Ward is going to be off the board at 1 with the Titans taking him.
Check mock draft 3.
You literally would be doing your organization, your team, the franchise a disservice if you don't explore this. If you don't allow teams to look at or you don't show interest in seeing what you can acquire for teams who are in need of a quarterback or somebody else. So for me, this is one of them situations where it's intriguing because they both need a quarterback, and there will be a quarterback available for one of these teams to take.
Oh, you mean later in the first round?
No, even where they sit currently. But the fact of them not being in love with the quarterback is why you would even entertain.
Yes, but here's the thing. This is the problem right now. There's no one's in love with their quarterbacks who they can potentially draft. And so now if you trade back with someone and you get someone else's first round pick next year or something like that, you now have to hope that team's bad. They're going to move up in the draft, and now they're going to get Hunter or Abdul Carter, whatever. And yeah, you'll now be able to get more draft capital, especially this year and the following year, but like this is already considered a weaker draft. So if you trade back, I don't know what you're necessarily getting that's going to really, really help you. If this was a really great draft, then you could trade back. You can get the versions of the Hunters and the Carters later on in the draft, and you get someone, again, someone's first round pick or something the next season or something. Then that I could see that benefiting you. But now you could get a player who you love, like a Travis Hunter, or now you're just going to get a player that you like, and then next year hope that pick is a high draft pick, and then you'll be able to get a quarterback. There's not enough juice there. If this was a deeper draft, then you could still get a player who you think is like awesome, or you're going to get a couple position players in a draft when there's so many quarterbacks, and so you're going to trade back, let all these other guys get the quarterbacks. All the top picks are going to be the quarterbacks. So by the time it's time for you to draft, you're going to be able to get like the second or third best position player on the board, which could be, a home run, and, depending on obviously what player it is. That doesn't feel the way how this draft is necessarily going to go. There could be a real situation. I don't think this is going to happen, but it technically could. One quarterback goes this draft, you know, and in the first round. Again, I assume there'll be more than that, but you know, just last season alone, it was a frenzy of everyone trying to get quarterbacks, and so we just don't have that going this year. And again, it also depends on who you're trading with. Because if you're not going to get a quarterback, if you're going to try to get a quarterback later in the draft of this draft, well then like what quarterback are you going to get? It's probably not going to be Shedeur. It's probably not going to be Dart. So then like so then if you say you need a quarterback, but then you're going to get a quarterback who you don't really think is that good, then you're still going to need a quarterback. Yeah, you drafted a quarterback, but like, okay, you drafted Kenny Pickett 2.0. Daniel Jones 2.0. So I sympathize where the teams are like the Giants and the Browns are, because it's like maybe they're not, you know, they're not crazy about Shedeur or Dart, and then it's kind of just like, all right. And I get what Nick's saying, because it's like, it doesn't matter how great of a player Hunter is, or Abdul Carter, or Myles Garrett, Micah, etc. That if you don't have a quarterback, you don't have a quarterback. But I take such issue with this. This is where the nonsense is. Where if you need a quarterback, you know, drafting Saquon Barkley or drafting some of these other guys, the wrong decision. Like, no, it's not. No, it's not. Sometimes you just have to wait a couple years to finally get your quarterback. But if you can get the Myles Garrett, if you can get the Saquon Barkley, then you get them. I don't know why I keep wanting to say the Cardinals, but blame the Browns, blame the Giants for not figuring out their quarterback position. They could have made moves. They could have went out and drafted another quarterback. They could have drafted Jalen Hurts. Like, you realize that? They could have drafted a Super Bowl MVP. They didn't have, you know, the Browns didn't have to make a play for Deshaun Watson. They could have stuck with Baker, a quarterback that Nick believes is great. So it's just not 100% accurate here. It's really not. You can't just say, oh, they needed a quarterback and instead they got Myles Garrett, or instead they got, you know, Saquon Barkley and that was their mistake. It's like, not necessarily. Those picks weren't necessarily wrong. Even if we look at this draft, and it's always easy to have revisionist history now that we know how this played out, right? We can always be like, oh my God, Josh Allen, why wasn't he number one overall? Or, whoever. We can always, play that game. Wasn't Lamar Jackson? Yeah, Lamar Jackson was in this draft as well. I mean, look at all these teams that didn't get Lamar Jackson. Because we say, oh man, the Giants, they should have drafted Lamar Jackson and they wouldn't be in this situation. And it's like, well, a lot of people didn't. And Sam Darnold, a lot of people thought was the correct pick for the New York Jets. Like that was the right move. The Denver Broncos passed on Josh Allen, and it haunts them, obviously. So you can always kind of do this whole revisionist history. So I try to just be like, no, okay, let's not look at these other quarterbacks. Josh Rosen was drafted 10, right? It was in it the following year that they then drafted Kyler Murray. So that's why looking at the past is not always the easiest thing to do, because you start to forget just how muddled things were, and you're just how was it not Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, 1 and 2, whatever order you want to use? I don't care. It's like, how was that not the case? Because it's just welcome to the NFL. That's how these things work. But if we go to the following year, because at that point they had Eli Manning, and yeah, Eli Manning's getting older, but still Eli was there for them. Now this is where it's interesting, because now the Giants were top 6 again, and so now they decided to draft their quarterback, and they decided to draft Daniel Jones, and we can kind of look around and be like, all right, where were the other opportunities for them here? And you're like, you're not really seeing any, or any other, because I don't remember every single draft off the top of my head. What was the next quarterback? Will Grier, was there any other great quarterback in that draft? It was just Kyler Murray and then Daniel Jones. Wow, they really made that move for Daniel Jones. Dwayne Haskins, right? That obviously went nowhere. Yeah, that's so fascinating. Because then, what if they drafted and they said, we're not going to get Daniel Jones and there's no other quarterback we really like here. They could have gotten TJ, could have gotten Gary, Dexter Lawrence. They obviously already did get him. Oh, because they had two picks right there, pretty close to each other. It is always easy to kind of have this revisionist history. Because now let's go to the next draft. Where we're at here. Now Joe Burrow went one. Now the Giants. Gosh, look how the Giants just keep drafting. And so here you go. Here's my point. I knew I was going to be proven correctly again. Boom. They decide to draft Andrew Thomas when they could have gotten Justin Herbert. They draft Justin Herbert. Drafting Saquon Barkley a couple years prior is no longer a mistake. Now you got Justin Herbert as your quarterback, and you got Saquon Barkley. You're in business. You are in business. Boom. So that's why sometimes the order is just different. Them drafting Daniel Jones was their mistake. That was their mistake. Heck, even Tua would have been better off. So that's kind of where I take issue with a blanket statement like Nick is kind of saying. Like, the Cleveland Browns must draft this guy. Like, hey, they drafted Myles Garrett and they should have gotten a quarterback. And it's like, well, it depends what quarterback you can get. And like I said, when you go back in time, it's so easy to pick like all the great quarterbacks. There's a reason why Patrick Mahomes wasn't the number 1 overall pick, the number 2 overall pick, number 3 overall pick, because that's the way these things go oftentimes. That's just the way it works. I mean, going back in time for these drafts are always so funny to me when you see, right, Zach Wilson, number 2 overall, Trey Lance, number 3. Like, they needed a quarterback and they drafted in the top 5 and they got their quarterback. Was it a mistake for them to draft Zach Wilson, Trey Lance? I think we know the answer to that. It was. What if the 49ers drafted Jamar Chase and then got Brock Purdy? That'd be a heck of a lineup. Are you kidding me? That would be beasts. That would be monstrous. That would be wild. And it would have been totally par for the course. It would have been totally fair game. Heck, even just having Jimmy Garoppolo throw into Jamar Chase would have been beast. Then you would have had the Avengers 2.0. Prime Debo, prime Jamar Chase, prime Kittle. You understand what I'm saying here? There is no master formula, master blanket statement to this. And we can use teams that have drafted poorly year after year after year, or made key mistakes and be like, well, see, they they didn't draft here and therefore it's bad. Like, no, it's not. No, it's not. It's just, you don't have these blanket statements. If it was that straightforward, that formulaic, then we would see all of the top 10, all of the top 15, top 20, they would all have this little mark next to it and would be, kind of yellowish. Because I think that means like, Pro Bowler or, something, whatever the key is for it. If you go far back enough, it'll be like Hall of Famer. But it's not. It's a mess. There's plenty of these misses. First round, second round. This draft actually had a pretty decent success rate. And to even, this will be my last example, to even just look at the Cleveland Browns again, getting Myles Garrett. Yes, we obviously know Patrick Mahomes existed, but a lot of people obviously didn't. That's why he was 10th. And the Kansas City Chiefs were comfortable enough going 10 and not trying to trade up to number 1. So that's obviously like this wasn't the Caleb Williams type situation. And if they drafted, it's not hard to imagine the Cleveland Browns could have drafted a Mitchell Trubisky. That would have obviously been a mistake. But they drafted Myles Garrett, and then the very next season, they go out and draft Baker Mayfield. Now, depending on how you feel about Baker was either a great guy, but the Browns just kind of messed it up. Let's just say that that's accurate. He's obviously won some games, won a playoff game with the Browns, but also now with the Bucks. But like, that wouldn't have been the worst move, if they could actually just build a better team, or if they got the draft right and got Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, then there you go. Then they have Myles Garrett and now Josh Allen. Just like how I said before, how you could have, Saquon Barkley and Justin Herbert, boom, you're in business. Imagine having Myles Garrett on the one side of the ball and Josh Allen on the other side of the ball. If you're no longer successful, like, again, that's on you as a franchise. So there are no blanket statements here. Heck, the Browns, they could have then drafted Saquon Barkley #1 for all it matters. And then within a couple years, let's see. They could have been top 10 and a couple years later, top 10 draft pick, could have traded up and then also had like Justin Herbert, Tua, etc. So, sometimes you got to play the long game. Sometimes if there's a player who you can really beat, who you really believe can be special, you get that player, you got him locked up, and then you go ahead and try to make moves. Jalen Hurts was the 53rd overall pick by the Philadelphia Eagles. Led them to a Super Bowl. Was drafted in the 2nd round. Where's that bad man at? Right there, Jalen Hurts, 53. That could have been the Browns. That could have been the Giants. That could have been a lot of these top teams that were drafting at the top of the lineup. They could have gotten their Justin Jeffersons, their CD Lambs, their Myles Garretts. They could have collected those guys and then got their Jalen Hurts in the 2nd round. And everyone says, oh, well, the Eagles, Jalen Hurts is only good because of a stacked team. Well, you had an opportunity over the last few drafts to build a stacked team and then draft Jalen Hurts. And clearly it's good enough to win a Super Bowl. I mean, that's not speculation. That's a literal fact. So, really, this is my long-winded way of saying there's no blanket statements in the draft. There are no have-tos, especially if you're a well-run franchise. If you're a well-run franchise, and if you're not, well, then the question isn't who you should draft. It's how do you become a better-run franchise? That becomes the question. Because if you're not a well-run franchise, I don't care who your quarterback is. I don't care who you draft. I don't care, who your coach is. You're not going to be good. You might get lucky enough where you get a good enough quarterback and you have the right pieces around him for a minute. But, like, you better hope you win right then and there. Otherwise, eventually you're going to bottom out. Eventually you will bottom out. But those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think? Do you think this would be a mistake for these teams to, I guess, not draft a quarterback? Would it be a mistake for them to not trade back? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment. So whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions. Let's get in some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here and absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to. Something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.